Good morning and greetings, fellow scientists. Thanks for joining us today. I'd like to welcome you all to the Wisconsin Science Festival for the online field trip, Meet the Lab, Cancer Detectives. My name is Travis. I'm at the Wisconsin Science Festival. I'm part of the team there, and we've got an amazing group of individuals joining us today from the Scala Lab. So we're really excited, and we'll introduce them in just a little bit and hand it off to our scientists to learn all sorts of fun things today. How can you participate? This is so important. We want you to be able to ask questions. So you'll notice that your picture and audio are muted. The chat isn't available, but the way that you can participate is through the Q&A function. So you pop that little Q&A button there and you type in whatever question you have, whether it's specifically about a science story, a science tool, a getting to know you kind of question. That's how you're going to get your questions over to our scientists today. As soon as that question's in and you have it typed in, I'll say it out loud for our researchers and scientists to respond to that. This field trip is going to be recorded, and as always, we ask that when you're doing this activity and all the activities of the Wisconsin Science Festival, that you have a responsible adult connected to your participation. We'd also like to thank all of our sponsors and partners that make the Wisconsin Science Festival possible. And you can find out more about activities and events during the festival at our website, wisconsinsciencefest.org. With that, we're so excited to get started today. So I'm going to pass it over to members of the Scala Lab, and we're going to start. We've got three members here today, Amani, Alexa, and Emmanuel. And Amani, can you lead us off?
Sure. Thank you, Travis. Hi, everyone. My name's Amani. I am a graduate student in Melissa Scala's lab. So what that means is that I'm in the process of getting my PhD right now. In Melissa's lab, I work on imaging cells to better understand how their signal changes under different treatments or putting them in different media, all these different things. So we're basically trying to see what's different when we look at them under different conditions. A little bit more about me. I started doing science in high school. So I'm originally from Madison, and I was a part of the youth apprenticeship program in Madison. And so I was working in a lab on campus when I was a junior in high school. And my research was looking at these little tiny squid. So you can see one. This is a Hawaiian bobtail squid. They're about the size of your thumb, so they're really small. And we were doing pretty hardcore biology, looking at how different proteins would change in the squid when they had bacteria around them. From there, I went up to Michigan Tech. So that's a small technical university up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So winters were rough, but it was a lot of fun. I got my bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering. And then from there, I joined Melissa Scala's lab. So in Melissa's lab, if you did the Meet the Labs thing, you've probably seen pictures like this. We look at pictures of cells. So these are the cells taken on our microscope. You can see that they're all pretty colors, and you can see some pretty cool detail of them, which is fun. And then something completely random and fun is I started helping with this Meet the Labs activity. And the first iteration, so this isn't the version that you guys have seen, but the first iteration had this picture of me with a little speech bubble next to it. And I shared it with my family, and my brother, of course, being a brother, made this meme of me saying that he is obviously the favorite child. So that's what has recently been going on in the lab. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to Alexa.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be able to be with you this afternoon. I'm excited to be part of your virtual field trip. I'm Alexa, and I also work in the Scala Lab. As you can see on your screen, our boss, Melissa, is in the far corner, and then the other three of us scientists are there pictured. But you see we have a pretty big lab with a lot of different people, a lot of different backgrounds. So a little bit about the work that I do with Melissa's lab. Like Amani, I also work with cancer. but I'm actually looking to develop some new medicines to treat cancer. And we use mice to do that in order to see how the medicines are working in a living system. Lots of imaging with Melissa's really cool microscopes and other work around that. And right now I'm working with two kinds of cancer. One is skin cancer, so it's called melanoma. It's very common. And another type is called pancreatic cancer, which the pancreas you may know about. It's kind of one of those strange organs, but it helps to digest your food, similar to other organs like your stomach. So those are what I'm working on right now. But in the past, going kind of way back, growing up when I was a middle schooler, just like you guys, I actually didn't really love science as a middle schooler. I think the focus was more on the like rocks and weather, and I didn't love it. But when I got into high school, I started learning biology and genetics and chemistry, and I think the living things and people and medicines, all of that, I really enjoyed quite a bit more. And so from there, I was interested in actually pursuing undergrad and a PhD in science, and I did both of those in chemistry, actually. So a little bit different than what Amani has done, but similar cancer work. So I just want to encourage you that even if you don't love science today, maybe in a few years you will. So keep your mind open to that. The other thing I wanted to mention was that I'm actually the first person in my family to get a PhD. And so I wasn't actually that familiar with all of the options of research and different things that you can do. So I recommend you really talk a lot with your teachers about those different opportunities. They were very helpful to me as I was going through high school and college to make those decisions. All right, so with that, I'm happy to talk more about the other aspects of the lab. But one thing I'll just add before I change over to Emmanuel is, as a chemist, I'm a big fan of beakers. So I'm going to show you these little beaker mugs. It's from Morgridge, which is where the Scala Lab is. And it's a nerdy but fun thing. I love to drink tea out of my little beaker mug. So just figured I'd share that today. With that, I'll pass over to Emmanuel.
Thank you, Alexa. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm a systems programmer for the lab, and I help with all sorts of programmings for the projects. Anything from image processing to summarizing data, data analysis, a little bit of machine learning, sort of all over the place. Also with cell segmentation, and I also help with instrumentation, so help and control some of our microscopes and some of our detectors and sensors. When I started school, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So I went through the whole biology field, took all the classes, and then halfway through I realized that I really enjoyed programming. So I took up computer science classes. I did graduate with biology with a computer science certificate, and eventually I decided to get my master's in biomedical engineering to focus on instrumentation. So more helping devices, and I still wanted to be close to medicine and close to doctors. So that's sort of what I went to school for, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to you guys' questions.
All right, fantastic. Appreciate those introductions. So we're seeing that in the Q&A, we've got a lot of questions going. So just as a reminder, put some in there. If you have a specific question for one of the researchers, please put that researcher's name in there so that we can ask them. You see that they all have unique aspects to their being part of that team in the research lab. Yeah, let's take a look at the next slide that shows a little bit of some of their pictures from the lab, and we'll leave that up a little bit. And I'm going to throw out the first question here that we've got, and it is related to some of the images here. This is from Walter. He says, we say that light reflects different colors. So how do you get colored cells in your body where light doesn't touch? So I know you work a lot with colors and things like that. So perhaps Amani, you could start us off with that, and maybe there's some pictures up there that would be great to show to connect to Walter's question.
Sure. So light definitely does reflect off of the body, and that means that you can't get very deep with this technology. So you'll see that a lot of the images that we have, they're of either cells that are flat on glass. So we take them out of the body and then put them in different conditions that lets us image them with light. And then the other part of this is the coloring. So when we say that we're looking at the colors, all of these pretty pictures, we're coloring them later. So when we image them, we are looking at very specific colors, but when we get the raw data, so the images that we haven't done anything to, they're just black and white. And they're cool, but not quite as pretty as making them pretty colors. So we add colors later because it helps people just looking at it see that there's something different going on. It's a lot easier to look for changes between orange and purple than it is to look for changes between white and slightly less white. So that's one change. And then I actually want to pass it off to Alexa quick because she does some of the animal imaging, so she can speak to imaging in actual animals.
Thanks, Amani. Yeah, Walter, this is a great question. It's actually one that as scientists, we have a little bit of a hard time sometimes imaging things that are deep inside the body, like you're saying, and that's part of where our lab can come in and help. Like Amani said, a lot of times we might image just actual cells, but with the mice that I work with, we actually can put a tumor on the side of the mouse, so it's close to the top of the skin where you can still access it. And then we can actually do a small surgery to image that tumor live while it's on the animal. So it certainly helps to get at some of the questions that we want to know. But you're right, Walter, it's not really very feasible to image all the way like inside your stomach or way inside the body where we can't access that area. So we have to kind of be creative with different ways to do that. One other thing I would mention is there are other imaging types that can image deep inside the body. It's just not ones that we work with. So you can do X-rays or MRIs or other techniques where you can see inside. So I'll leave it at that.
That's fantastic. Thanks for that. So there's a related question here from Evelyn. She wants to know what are some of the tools you use in lab? And then I'm going to pair up a question from Caitlin, who says, how often are you working? So Caitlin wants to know, how often are you actually using those tools and working? And then what are some of those tools? So Emmanuel, can you lead us off?
Yes, sure. So I think some of the tools I use more for like the research whenever we're conducting an experiment. Some days we may use them, some days we don't. But part of what I do is do programming on my computer, and then eventually if we want to test it, I look at how that's running on the tool. So for me, I don't use them every day, but frequently enough on the programming side.
So Alexa, how about you? What kind of tools are you using?
Sure. So good question. The kinds of tools we use in our lab, a lot of microscopes, like we've said. We have a couple different kinds of microscopes. And other than that, we have special hoods where we have our cells growing and we keep them safe and clean from other disease in those special hoods. We use pipettes and beakers to make solutions. Let's see, I have special measuring tools to measure the tumors on the mice. They're called calipers. Lots of different tools. And for me, if I'm in lab, I'm probably using multiple of those tools every day. But other days, maybe I'm just doing analysis, kind of like what Emmanuel is talking about, and perhaps I'm just working on my computer. So it depends on the experiment that day.
And one thing, maybe y'all can hold up like the number of hours you think you might work in a day, and you can't be 24. That was part of that question. I don't know, what do you think? Because I know that it's very different from day to day. There you go. That's great. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Cool. All right. So a couple of questions here that are a little bit about you. There's a question from Braylon about what do you like to do outside of the lab? Did you play any sports? And what made, and then another question from Jessica, what made you all want to do this in the first place? So like, how did you, Jessica wants to know why are you a researcher? And that would be great. So Amani, can you lead us off?
Sure. Good questions. So outside of lab work, I do sports. So I was a runner in high school and I still run a lot of races now. a little bit different with the lockdown. So I've been doing a lot of virtual races instead, but I try to get out and run, I bike. I used to play ultimate frisbee and soccer a lot, but not quite as much anymore. And then I also knit. So I made this scarf in the evening. So I spend a lot of time knitting just to keep my mind off of other things. It's kind of relaxing to me. And the reason I got into science is I have always been curious. So I always wanted to know kind of how things work. If I did something, what would happen? And I would run like little experiments in my kitchen when I was a kid. So I would take like baking soda and vinegar and watch it explode and try to figure out why. And if like different amounts of vinegar would change and all that kind of stuff. So I was always curious about stuff like that. So when I started getting into science, when I was in high school, I always had this thought that there wasn't that much that we could discover. So it always seemed like when you're getting taught science, they're telling you what's already known. So it was like, oh, we already know how this works. We already know how that works. But I started doing research because I was curious if there was stuff that we didn't know. And I found that there's a lot of stuff that we haven't figured out yet. And as technology gets better, I'm sure Emmanuel can speak to this, there's more stuff that we don't know because now we can look at stuff we didn't even know existed before. So that's kind of how I got into science.
That's great. Emmanuel, did you have any thoughts about things you like to do outside of the lab? And yeah, that would be awesome if you could share.
Sure. So outside the lab, I really enjoy biking, especially now with COVID. It's a good activity that you can do on your own. So biking anywhere, and Madison's a great place to bike. There's a lot of places, there's a lot of trails. So I tend to do that. When COVID is not around, I also like to play soccer, pick up soccer, and then just go on walks. I've always enjoyed computers, and I think for me, I wanted to sort of combine computers and science in a way that I could see some sort of outcome and some sort of way to help people through it. So this is, I started doing computers in high school and then sort of picked up from there, went into programming, and then found this lab, which allowed me to do both things at once.
Cool. And just a shout out to Owen Emmanuel, who asked you specifically about that question. He's, he wanted to know, what do you like to do outside the lab there? That's great. Alexa, how about you?
All right, well, outside of working and lab hours, I love volleyball. That's my favorite sport. I've been playing since I was in 8th grade, so not that, probably the same grade as a lot of you guys. I am not playing right now because of the pandemic, but that's normally something I play all year round, inside or sand. I also really enjoy cooking. That's one of like a hobby that I definitely have. It's fun to eat new foods, but also just to have checked out different foods that different cultures make. I like to try different things. And for the science side, I think it started, again, like I said, more in high school, where I was like, wow, I really like all of these aspects of science that relate to living things, animals, people, medicines. And so I first was going into chemistry because I thought perhaps I could help with making new medicines. That's one big thing chemists can do, is make new molecules. And I did that for a while and really enjoyed it. But the more that I did that, the more I realized I really want to be able to help in this area of cancer. And like Amani said, there are so many questions and things that we're still not sure about. And so the more that I've pursued it, the more that I've been motivated to try to do a small part to be able to help answer some of those questions.
Awesome, thank you. Mila had a question here, and y'all kind of talked about a little bit about some of the ways that you're coping. How do you keep sane with the pandemic going on? So we've covered a little bit of that. And the next question though, is it harder to help out? Is it harder helping, meaning like to do your lab work? How have you adjusted your scientist work within there? If you got some ideas to let everybody know how that's impacted your work. So Alexa, maybe you can start us off.
Sure. Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Amelia. COVID has changed the way that we work quite a bit because as you saw on our slide, we're a big lab and we work together on all of our projects. I also have Melissa as my boss, but I have another boss who's a doctor. And so we work with their lab too. So with COVID, one thing that's different, and it's similar to probably what you guys are doing, is we have all our meetings over video like this, right? So we don't meet as a group in person at all. So we have lots of lab meetings every week, but it's always over video. And for the lab to keep safe, we're signing up on a calendar so that when we go in, we're probably the only person around in our area to keep everybody safe. I'll leave it at that, and maybe Amani could add more.
The only other difference is you have to be very good at planning your experiments, because now you're only in lab when you have time booked on the calendar. So instead of being like, oh, I guess I'm going to do it now, you have to be like, nope, 4 days in advance. On Thursday, I'm doing this. And so that's been a bit of a difference as well.
Awesome. Thank you too. So Isabella also had a similar question to that. So Mila and Isabella, hopefully that answered your questions. We got an easy one here. Well, maybe it's easy. Caleb wants to know, what is your favorite color? So Emmanuel, you got a favorite color?
Hi, good question, Caleb. I like purple.
All right.
Yeah.
How about you, Alexa?
Blue for me.
I really like teal. So that nice mix of blue and green.
Cool. All right. So we've got a couple of science questions related around, like, how do you make a new discovery? Cheng Yu, is a question about how do you discover new stuff and other stuff, and a few questions about what is cancer and types of cancer. There's a question about what's skin cancer, what's the worst kind of cancer. So I know we won't be able to go into all those details, but a little touch of, how do you make discoveries, and the theme around what is cancer. So Vanessa, Graciela, and Cheng Yu are really curious about that. So let's, Amani, can you help us out to answer some of those?
Of course, those are some good questions. So I'll talk about cancer first, and then I'll go into how we make discoveries in our lab. So cancer is what happens when your cells get sick and they start growing out of control. So all cells grow, but they usually grow pretty slow and pretty consistent. But sometimes they get sick and they just start dividing and dividing and dividing, and then you end up with 20 cells where there should have only been 2. And that's kind of how cancer usually starts. Some types of cancer are caused by certain things, like cigarette smoke can cause lung cancer, but other cancers just happen because people get old and their cells start getting sick. And that is an unfortunate reality of being a mammal, really, because pretty much all mammals are prone to cancer. So that's kind of how cancer happens. And then how we make discoveries in the lab is actually a pretty interesting mix. So we like to look at literature, so papers that other groups have published, and see if there's something that they have said, oh, this is something that we saw, and see if we can look at it using our tools. So that's one way we make discoveries. And another way is just by being in the lab. Sometimes you'll set up an experiment to do one thing, and if you're looking at the data you get or the images you'll get, you'll notice something completely different. And that can kind of lead to a rabbit hole of discovery where you say, oh, I didn't think that was a change that was possible to detect, but now there's something cool happening. That's definitely happened to me during my PhD. So.
And Emmanuel, there's a related question there about discovery and wanting to know a little bit about what kind of things you do as a computer programmer. Fred was interested in that. Like, how do you make discoveries around cancer, computer programming?
Sure. Yeah, good question. So a lot of the images that my colleagues take, I take and analyze, and then we can summarize those and compare what is normal cells versus what is a cancer cell. So looking at the difference through codings, because at the end of the day, all images are just numbers underneath. So we can take those and manipulate them through code and make a distinction between normal and cancer cells. And once we see that, then that becomes data that tells us that there's a discovery there.
All right. So we've got one like really amazing, well, actually 2 questions. I'm going to put it together here. This one's from Emma. Is there any one person who inspired you to decide to be more interested in science and other things? And what's your favorite part of the job? That's an Ivanka question. So Alexa, maybe you could, was there an inspiration, and what's your favorite thing, or one of your favorite things?
Sure. Big questions, but they're important ones. And it actually touches back on the story I was sharing earlier. I have one teacher in particular, but there were many who were good mentors when I was in college. The one I have in mind, her name is Jessica. And she was very helpful in giving me confidence as a student that I actually had a little bit of skills that perhaps I could actually follow science and I would do okay. But she also helped answer a lot of questions for me and give me some ideas of different jobs and other things I could do with a science career. So Jessica was a huge helper for me as a student. And one of the things I really enjoy about the job, oh man, there's so many aspects. It's a hard one to like pick a favorite or pick one. But let's see. I mean, I actually really like even just the organizational side of experiments, of like Amani was saying, we have to be very careful about planning and thinking about all of the different questions we want to ask. And that takes a lot of time, but that part can be really fun because you never know what you're going to find once you start doing your experiment. So there can be surprises, but also that planning part I actually enjoy.
So how about, we got just probably our last question. So a favorite and inspiration, we'll go Emmanuel and then Amani, and then I'll have some closing connections. So Emmanuel, how about you?
I think for inspiration, I've seen so much technology evolve over the past years, and that makes me be more curious and see how we can apply that through science.
And
So that's
Amani,
that's been my inspiration, just more technology and the evolution of it.
cool. That's super cool. How about you, Amani?
So my inspiration is a little bit of two different things, I would say. So I had some really good elementary school teachers that taught me science in a weird way. So we had a pet rabbit in one of my classes. And so we got to learn about the biology of rabbits because we had a pet rabbit in the class, which was kind of fun. And then the other inspiration I would say is my dad. So he's a high school chemistry teacher. So he was always bringing science around whenever we were helping him set up his classroom for the beginning of the school year. There was all this science equipment everywhere. He would let us run mini experiments. He would bring stuff home and we would like make bottle rockets and stuff like that out of chemistry. So that was always fun. And then I think my favorite part of the lab is that we get to make discoveries, which I think is really cool. And then the other aspect is that we don't do the same thing every day. So it's not a job where you go and you know exactly what you're going to do every single day, which to me, I think would be kind of boring. I really like that you come in and it's like, okay, on Monday, I'm putting the cells in a dish. On Tuesday, I'm treating the cells with something. On Wednesday, I'm imaging them. And then on Thursday and Friday, I'm figuring out if it worked or not. And so there's a lot of change that happens over a single week, which is kind of fun.
Awesome. Fantastic. It was so amazing to learn how you all work together as a team and you have your individual creativity, talents, and persistence and expertise as scientists. So thank you so much for sharing. We really appreciate it. The questions were amazing as well. Thank you everybody for joining in. We had so many great questions. I know we didn't get to them all. And your curiosity can still be explored. There's a website for Meet the Lab at PBS Wisconsin Education. You can find out a heck of a lot more. So check out that project and that will be a good place to do some next steps if you haven't too. So thanks again for everybody for joining us at the Wisconsin Science Festival. Our field trip presenters, Amani, Alexa, Emmanuel, thank you. That was really great. We're gonna have a recording of this available and we'll follow up with teachers about that. The Wisconsin Science Festival is continuing on. So across the state, there's many things happening and you can participate. Check it out on the website, wisconsinsciencefest.org for more fun science. So we'll see you there. Thanks, everybody.